as much as I'd love to jump on the Mercedes hype train and say that they're back and next year it would be super close, I think we're both singing from the same hymn sheet here, Shez. But from a data analytics perspective, here's what's happened. I think Mercedes are gapping all of the teams not named Red Bull, and that's where I think it's flattering to deceive. The gap to Red Bull is as near as makes no difference, the same as it was in the early stages of this championship.
My observation for Lewis is that if you put this in football terms, in terms of where he's strong, he's really strong in open play, right? Where it's about managing your tires in the middle of a race, and when all things are constant, coming out on top. It's in the set pieces that he has problems.
Every single driver on the grid has weaknesses, but Lewis's peaks on like if this is like Street Fighter and on the attributes, Lewis's 10 was always on like speed and racecraft, right? Not even racecraft, it was genius racecraft, but the raw pace, Shez, no one on that grid. So almost that 10 on Lewis Hamilton's raw pace almost just made these other like 6s and 7s just fade to black. They were irrelevant, weren't they? They didn't even make, nobody could get, because ultimately he could do a madness like he used to do in GP2 and just come from the back, or Brazil 2021, because he just was fast enough. Here's the problem if we're talking about beating a Max Verstappen, Shez. I think he's probably just about, in race trim, I think he's every bit as quick as Lewis Hamilton. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown. With me, co-host, he's back, isn't he? We had to get him back on. Shezinho, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, I like Shezinho on the weekend of the Brazilian Grand Prix.
That
should be my Brazilian name.
I didn't even know. This is true. I just called you that. I wasn't doing the time context thing. That was incidental genius from me over here. But let's talk about some F1 because there's lots to get to, man. First and foremost, I think I've solved sprint formats. And the only reason why I've solved it is because they were asking, Naomi Schiff of Sky Sports F1 was asking the question to all of the drivers at the pre-race press conference. Shez, here, let me pitch this at you very quickly. Here's what they need to do. And we've talked about it before. Sprint format isn't perfect. It's a brilliant idea, but I think it's not in its final form yet. Here's its final form. Shez, this is what they need to do. Tweet straight off, hot off the press. FP1 stays. On Friday, they do a reverse grid race. And again, you've been a long arguer of the reverse grid, but not a quali and then a reverse grid. Per that quali, that wouldn't work. Do the reverse grid based on the existing World Drivers' Championship standing done, and then there's no fudging that system, right? Because everybody wants to win the World Drivers' Championship. That's your Friday. Saturday, do FP2 and then do qualifying as normal. That gets rid of your disconnect. You're not having qualifying on Friday, which is connected to the race on Sunday, and then by Sunday's happened, nobody remembers what the qualifying positions are. Like, you get rid of all these nonsense. Everything's where it needs to be. Shez, have we not just solved for the sprint qualifying conundrum there?
Cameron, genius. Yeah, love it. Two things. First one, any format that includes a reverse championship order race is always gonna be a win for me. Just to clarify, when you're talking about reverse championship order, do you mean literally the person that's first in the championship starts at the back? There's no top 10
correct.
Or top
Sack
15.
all that off. Keep it simple, stupid. Exactly that, Shez.
Yeah, love it. I love it. Especially because that means, and this is what I've said for ages, right? That if you give the teams an objective, which is that you need to get from the back to the front, they will automatically set the car up to be able to overtake and follow, without you having to create a technical directive or technical regulations that try and artificially force that. If you make the competitive objective to overtake, the teams will design for that. That's the ultimate solve for overtaking. So I am always gonna be happy with anything that involves reverse championship order racing. Um, the FP2 thing. So one of the nice things about the sprint up until Austin was that actually having to lock in your setup without having a huge amount of information going into the race was one of the nice things about the sprint format, because like with the best will in the world, what ends up happening is when you have FP1 and FP2, the teams just build up an absolute humongous amount of data, and they know what's going to happen in the race before they even start. Notwithstanding a change in weather or an accident, but otherwise it's not a surprise to them, and therefore it's not going to be a surprise to us necessarily. So taking away free practice sessions, I think, actually works in favor of the race. It just backfired because everything has unintended consequences, right? So
I think only having one Shez is too far the other way, right? Just keep the two. FP1 and FP2 stays in. Parc Fermé kicks in after the proper qualifying session. You kind of got your best of both worlds there, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. It's just with the current sprint qualifying, with the current sprint format, you don't have the second free practice session, right? That's where
not enough.
But that's where actually not having the data makes the race more interesting. Okay, we had a problem in Austin because of the plank issue, and the teams will argue that we didn't know that this is what was going to happen because we didn't do long runs. But then now they know that's an issue, so they will need to change their programs in FP1. So not having a second free practice session might be something that a lot of teams want. But as a race fan, I'm happy to not have it because it just adds an extra level of jeopardy and unknown to race day.
Ivy, let me tell you how sick I think this idea is, Shez. I'm reaching here, but bear with me. I think this idea is so good, and it's the perfect hybrid of both the old school where there was no sprint and the new school with sprint qualifying or sprint shootout, whatever they want to call it. I think you could potentially roll this through to each and every single race weekend, bruv. I think it would be nuts. I think it would be like properly, it would solve for all of their sprint qualifying.
I would definitely be watching, 100% be watching well, not that I don't watch anyway, but every you would not be able to miss a single session.
Mate, incredible.
You're talking about the reverse race on Friday though.
Yeah, so after FP1.
Okay. Can we tweak that a little bit?
Go on.
Can we stick that on a Saturday? Because like what I don't want is
you don't want to be at work and not be able to watch it. I hear you.
Exactly. Like which will possibly be the best bit of the weekend to have that on a Friday evening.
Oh, it'd be so sick, mate. They can tinker with the days. I'm happy for them to tinker with the dates and the days of the fixtures, but that has to be the idea.
But otherwise, love it. Sack off FP2, but otherwise, love it.
Yeah, get that check in the post to me, FIA. You are welcome. Solved. And to be fair, I need to give Lewis Hamilton a bit of credit because at the press conference just now, when they were all asked which triggered this thought process, they were asked about sprint qualifying. Lewis responded that the best sprint race that he's ever raced in was at this fixture in 2021, of course, when he started from the back and got penalised a gazillion times. Go on then, Shez. Let's talk about Brazil, since I've just segued very nicely onto it. Race could get a bit techie, eh? Another altitude one, another one where Mercedes have gone well at historically. What do you reckon, bro? Let me pitch the question this way. Can Mercedes repeat history here and go well, or go some way to closing the gap on that? And can they challenge Max Verstappen's Red Bull?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to that is yes. I think the pattern of races this season has been that where Mercedes was strong last season, they've been strong again this season in general. So there's no reason necessary to expect that they won't be strong in Brazil. The only confounder to that, because you're asking, can they win? Last year you could say that Mercedes were strong and they won on merit, but there was the problem that Red Bull didn't switch on their tires and came on with a slightly dodgy strategy in terms of how they set things up. So if Red Bull have learnt their lesson from last season, I don't think it'll be quite as easy. I think they'll be much more competitive. It won't be like a I don't think it will be like a Max in Singapore situation, which it kind of was last year, which is what opened it up to allowing the Mercs to have their way. But man, I'm pretty psyched about this because was it two second places in the last two races from Lewis, right? And even in Singapore, they were really, they were on it. There would have been a second place in there as well if they just kept their positions. It's getting closer. It's getting closer and closer and closer, and you can see Lewis getting hungrier and hungrier.
But is it though, really, Shez? Is this not a massive case of instant anomalous circumstances, altitude, excessive contours on tracks, dodgy setups over sprint race weekend? Is this not a case of a cacophony of anomalies working together to flatter, to deceive on exactly how much Mercedes have closed the gap to Red Bull? I don't know.
Cameron, I'm not calling it a harbinger for what's going to happen next season. All I'm saying is right here, right now, there are enough factors in Mercedes' favor, and momentum seems to be going their way in terms of how they're operating. And I mean, race on race improvement, that you could call it that this weekend they've got a good chance of having another huge result, perhaps even as big as last season. Whether that translates into something next year, I don't know.
Shez, oh, this is techie, man. All I know is this, Shez. I did start to drink the hopium, right? I did start to think I've tried to, brother. I've been drinking it over the last couple of races with some half decent Lewis Hamilton performances, right? Just like we all have. And then I thought, let me get my calculator out last race. 32 laps in to the Mexican Grand Prix before any safety car. Safety car came out or the race restart happened on lap 34, I think. 32 laps in after one round of pit stops. Max Verstappen had gapped the field to 16 seconds. Now, my Naddy math says that's circa half a second per lap. That's where we were. Isn't that where we were in Bahrain? Like near enough. And again, you want to super time it and do the percentages per, because each lap is a different like I get it. But we're near enough where we were. I think what's happened is this, Shez, and I don't want to conflate the 2 points. As much as I'd love to jump on the Mercedes hype train and say that they're back and next year it would be super close. I think we're both singing from the same hymn sheet here, Shez. But from a data analytics perspective, here's what's happened. I think Mercedes are gapping all of the teams not named Red Bull. And that's where I think it's flattering to deceive. The gap to Red Bull is as near as makes no difference, the same as it was in the early stages of this championship. Plus, when you overlay that with the comments coming out from Eddie Jordan, Adrian Newey saying, listen, I think we're going to gap the rest even further than we have been doing this year, next year. Bro, I don't know. I don't want to piss on anybody's copium fire here, but I'm a bit pessimistic, bro. As much as I want to see a fight, me, Shez, I really want to see a fight in 2024 and 25 between Max and Lewis, preferably, and throw Charles and Lando in there for good measure. That would be perfect. But I'm scared of the balls that are red, Shez, with good reason. Apparently, if data's anything to go by.
Yeah, I am too. I saw a tweet from Obs this week saying that if you look at if you look at the floor on Checo's car in Mexico, it's barely changed all season. They're not putting anything on that car because they just don't need to. And it would be silly to think that they won't have that advantage going into next season. The question is, how much has everybody else learned in the intervening period? That's a completely unknowable question. And the thing is, Adrian Newey can say what he said, and say that we're going to be further ahead. But at some point, two things: one, there will be a law of the law of diminishing returns will apply at some point. And second, he is not party to how much other teams have learned and what they are applying in the background. what's happening right now is just a function of Merck doing what they did last season, which is less about making their car better, more about optimizing it better, understanding the car they have right now better. And in the last two races, at least, starting to be a bit better from a strategy and pit stop point of view, right? Which is actually what this season was all about. Like once they knew what the car was like in Bahrain, actually, yeah, learn what you can, but actually the objective is to get your pit stops, get your strategy, get your operations absolutely pin sharp, which has taken them too long to get to, but they're starting to do it belatedly now, and wait to next year again, unfortunately, to see what happens. But I agree with you. Look, I've got some optimism that the gap will be smaller. Am I certain of that? No. Is anyone? No. And the only thing that we have is historical data. So the last time that Red Bull went on a massive run like this, it seemed to seesaw season to season. So 2010 was close, 2011 was not, 12 was close again, and 2013 again was not. So if we follow that form rule book, and there's no reason to think that it will, there's some hope at least for next season that things will be closer. All we can do is hope, right? I mean, what else have we got?
Yes, all we can do is hope. Let me ask you a question, Shez, and we've been talking back and forth offline about this. In the same vein, in the name of competition for 2024 and 2025, Lewis has nailed it right. He looked like the old Lewis, particularly the overtake on Charles Leclerc at the last Grand Prix was like quintessential Lewis Hamilton. Put a bloody wheel on the grass, doesn't hesitate, full throttle, irrespective. Shades of 2016 Barcelona with Rosberg, but we all know how that worked out. Not the negative outcome. Levels, bravery, racecraft, wheel knowledge, everything was in there. Been arguing back and forth though, Shez, about Lewis Hamilton's prime, because here, let me posit this. I will submit this to you. I think with Max Verstappen in his prime, as far as his physical age, I think Lewis, if Lewis has taken even one step back, Shez, I think that might make his job against Max Verstappen and even Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris, who are ostensibly in their prime as far as age. I think that might make Lewis's job really, really difficult if the mission statement is to win the 8th, if only because still in my mind, F1 is a young man's game. Lewis is 38, 39, going into 40 years old, and not too many people ever in all of F1 history have won championships at that age or older. Shez, talk to me, bruv. First question, is Lewis still in his prime? And does it even matter if we're talking about beating Max Verstappen in the outer years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I do need to throw one question back at you, which is, can you define what prime means to you?
Yeah, of course. So I think prime's always meant loosely, and again, this is one everyone will have a different definition. By prime, I'm talking physical prime, Shez, at the peak of his physical powers. Now, I know where you're going with this. That F1's not. I mean, we said offline, right? F1 isn't the 100 meters. It's not that level of physical exertion as far as it. I mean, if you're doing like a percentage of the whole, like it's the physical is a lot smaller than it would be the 100 meters or rugby or NFL or whatever else. But because F1 is a sport of fine margins, a story told in tense, etc., etc., all of these things ultimately matter. We've gone through this with bloody Mercedes talking about how they deprioritized pit stops and they had the fastest car, so they didn't need to. These things matter, bro. Like if you're spending hundreds of millions in a cost cap era on something that could gain you a couple tenths, all of these things are ultimately going to matter when all is told, right? Like we saw Abu Dhabi 21 was how fine were those margins then? So each one of these things contribute to the whole materially. And if that's the mantra, if that's the framework, Shez, I'm really, really scared that in a 23-24 race season, jet setting all over the world, against a Max Verstappen who's only getting better. He's probably not even hit his physical prime yet. I'm worried that we'll look back on these conversations in a couple of years' time and think, bloody Nora, listen, Lewis was punching above his weight for a couple of seasons there as he got into the latter stages of his career, and it almost was unfair to even think that Lewis at this stage of his career could take it to these younger chaps. That's what I mean by prime, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. Thanks. And if you're talking about purely from a physical condition point of view, then yeah, I mean everyone's performance is going to drop off. Everyone's resilience will change over time. But as we also said as we said offline, there's an entire field of sports medicine that's dedicated to maintaining performance into the latter stages of your career, and there's athletes that have benefited from that. You can talk about your Tom Brady's, you can talk about your Roger Federer's, and Lewis I think drops into that conversation as well. I think my biggest fear is not that Lewis is not in his prime, because I think materially there hasn't been a drop-off necessarily in his performance. He's still doing the things he did well. Like he's still able to manage tires. When there's an opportunity to win a race or to gain position, and he knows exactly what he needs to do, what the mission statement is at that point, he'll do it. When there's a bit of ambiguity, he still makes mistakes, which is why I think Qatar happened. So I don't think he's necessarily dropped off his prime. The fear for me is his prime actually good enough when drivers like Verstappen and Leclerc and Norris have not reached their prime? Is their prime, is the level that they have potential to reach higher than what Lewis's prime is? And Lewis still has areas that he can improve on. So if this is the best that Lewis can be, it's a great level, but there is a level above that because we've identified things that he could be better on. My observation for Lewis is that if you put this in football terms, in terms of where he's strong, he's really strong in open play, right? Where it's about managing your tires in the middle of a race, and when all things are constant, coming out on top. It's in the set pieces that he has problems, and we've seen that for the last few seasons. And being stuck in the pack has highlighted that a bit more. I don't think he was ever brilliant in the middle of the pack. It's just that he always had a way of getting out of it, so he didn't have to deal with it. Now he doesn't have that so much, and we're seeing it a bit more. So those are things that he can improve on if he has the motivation to do it. And he does have motivation. It's just whether or not he can improve on that. The problem for him is that the other drivers are already starting to get to his level in terms of tire management and racecraft and how to manage a race, but they're already starting to improve on his levels in set pieces. So the prime is different. And that's what I worry about. Is Lewis's prime good enough to take on others' improving performance?
Wow. Love that, bruv. I just don't think this is so techie, Shez. This is proper techie. So I don't think Lewis can be in his prime now, not at 38. But again, I almost I like the way you've termed it there. This makes me feel like, is Lewis in his prime a misnomer? Does he need to be in his prime to beat Max Verstappen? Here's my issue, Shez. Back in the day, when Lewis was in his, but let's go 2007, right? The thing that he had, and that's probably not even his prime, but he hadn't taken a step back there physically. He was far too young. Here's what Lewis always had. His USP, with everything said, that like penchant to make a cheeky mistake sometimes. You can talk about his ability to manage a race in real time, the strategic element. Like he always had there were always blind spots, right? As there is with every bloody driver, whether that's Alonso and his inability to manage a political a situation where there's political uncertainty. Like every single driver on the grid has weaknesses, but Lewis's peaks, unlike if this is like Street Fighter and on the attributes, Lewis's 10 was always on like speed and racecraft, right? For not even racecraft, is genius race car, but the raw pace, Shez, no one on that grid. So almost that 10 on Lewis Hamilton's raw pace almost just made these other like 6s and 7s just fade to black. They were irrelevant, weren't they? They didn't even make, nobody could get, because ultimately he could do a madness like he used to do in GP2 and just come from the back, or Brazil 2021, because he just was fast enough. Here's the problem if we're talking about beating game Max Verstappen, Shez. I think he's probably just about, in race trim, I think he's every bit as quick as Lewis Hamilton. And so no longer do you know what I mean? In that context, if we're doing a versus Lewis Hamilton in 24 versus Max Verstappen in 24, no longer as Lewis's 10 just materially offset his 6 on in-race restarts, race restarts, and I don't know, in real time strategy, the ability to know when to come on an interval, like no longer, because we're talking about Max Verstappen and his rate of growth and all the things that he's adding to his toolbox in real time. No longer can Lewis just, okay, so here's my 10 and the rest of the stuff doesn't matter, because this isn't Fernando Alonso in 2006, but Max Verstappen is a different beast, chap. Spends all of his life in the sim, spends all of his life talking and doing racing. Like he's just like, I don't know, bro. It concerns me, man. That concerns me as a Lewis Hamilton fan, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I take your point, but there's a lot of confounders in that as well, right? Yes, there is the potential that what you're saying is right, that as Max is going up, that Lewis is staying static, and perhaps Max will surpass that. But the evidence that we have in front of us doesn't really support that in isolation, at least, is it? The fact that he was able to pull the gap that he did to Charles Leclerc on those mediums in Mexico means that he knew where the limit of the grip was in the tire. That's what you need to know. That's not a physical conditioning thing. That's a feel thing. Can I tell how much grip this tire has given me so far? Can I tell how much it's got to give me over the course of the race, and how much can I meter that out over the course of the race and maximize that? He still got that. You could argue that he left a little bit on the table, given that he got fastest lap on the final lap.
100.
But he prefaced that as well, saying that he backed off because he knew that my objective now is not to catch Max, it's to keep Charles behind me, which is what he did. So even that, there was logic to it. And the way that he came back at Max in Austin, a couple of dodgy pit stops aside, that was on par pace against ostensibly the quickest car on the grid right now. So for me, that's not an issue. I still think he's got legendary race pace, right? And he's had that from race one. I watched back the 2007 Australian Grand Prix the other day, which if people get a chance, you should definitely go and watch that again. But there was a line from it that, even against Alonso, the master racecraft tactician, Lewis was quicker over the long runs. And okay, there's an argument about he had more experience on the Bridgestones than Fernando did, but that was a hallmark that's carried on throughout his career. Qualifying was never the big thing for him. It was always about how quick he could get through a race. I don't think that 10 out of 10 that you're talking about, the top trumps, Street Fighter, sorry, I still think he's got that 10 out of 10. Whether other people are reaching that 10 out of 10, there's too much confounding. The car difference between what he has and what Max is driving.
You can't tell right now.
Yeah.
You can't tell right now, but
we'll find out, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully. Over to you, Mercedes. I said on, I think the last podcast when we were talking about Mexico, that I never for a second, Shez, and again to put this in some context and some framing, I never for a second doubted that in 21 Lewis Hamilton was going to nail Max Verstappen for the championship, because that's just Lewis Hamilton. And if you boil this down to a more micro example, at the Mexican Grand Prix, Shez, I was doing a watch along, and I've very rarely seen a circumstance where charging Lewis Hamilton on fresher tyres with that gap, I think it was 12 seconds or something like that, off the back of Lewis's last pit stop with about 10 laps to go. I've just never seen anybody hold off a charging Lewis Hamilton in that circumstance. And when Max Verstappen did that, Shez, I knew I was looking at something a little bit different in that chap. I think he's a different beast in the fact that he'd managed his tyres. So very similar to what Lewis did in Mexico this year, right? The way that he managed his tyres over the final stint, just very Lewis Hamilton-esque type things. Bring it on, Mercedes. I need to see it, bruv. And speaking to that, let's talk about Mike Elliott, Shez, because we have to, don't we? Mate, your buddy, bruv, your mate, responsible, some people say, for the zero pod disaster. Talk to me about Mike Elliott, bruv. And I don't want to like dance on the chap's grave, because I don't think that's what this channel is about. But how do you characterise Mike Elliott's departure?
Look, I think as soon as he went into that chief technical officer role, the writing was kind of on the wall. That was never really a promotion. It was always you've been moved out of the firing line, and I get that. Am I upset that he's left? Yes, because I think no matter what anyone says about the zero pod design, number one, he was responsible for a lot of the designs of championship winning cars going backwards. We can't forget that. He was a long time James Allison collaborator. They were together at Lotus as well. And you know what, even then it was a combination that liked to push the limits. So if you guys remember back when we had the blown diffusers, Lotus pioneered this front-facing exhaust solution, which in theory really should have brought performance to their car. But what ended up happening is that it limited the potential for development of their car. They reached the zenith of it too quickly. And that, I think, is what happened with the zero pods. But what I think happened on this occasion, and we've talked about this before, is that they didn't realize what the limit of the potential of that concept was, and they kept going with it a mite too long. But Cameron, again, this is going to reopen a debate, right? This is very easy to look at in hindsight.
True.
Right. But when you've got a car that is when you can see in 2022 what you need to do to get faster, and in 2023 in Bahrain, actually the car is faster. It's just that everybody else has moved further. That's difficult to know. And over the winter, you don't know what everybody else is doing. I think that's where this fell apart. You can always go back to why didn't they listen to Lewis, and he was telling them that they should do this, but even Lewis has said this, like, I'm not the one with the PhD. I'm not the one that has gone to mechanical engineering school. There has to be a level of trust between the both of us. And I'm telling them what's in the car. They're telling me, look, man, there's more performance in the car. Trust us. There's a bit of give and take. And ultimately, I think Mike Elliott paid the price for that, because I think the expectations at a team like Mercedes are so great that they're just not going to accept being anything other than first. So if they've got a way to get back to that, they'll do it. But it doesn't take away from, one, what he's done in the past, and two, the underlying logic behind why they continue. I'm sure people will disagree with me on this, but from a purely scientific experimental point of view, you can't chuck something out until you know absolutely how far that's going to go, which is what they did. It's cost them performance this season.
Oh, Shez. That zero pod thing, I just hate it forever.
I know you do.
It's too much, Shez. It's too much. My shoulders are far too fragile to bear the burden of relitigating for zero pod. It's just I agree with you to a certain extent, Shez. You know this. Everybody can make it. Aero and design concepts and all that stuff is like way above my pay grade and my understanding. Right, this is complicated. SH1T. It absolutely is, Shez. So I don't hate that they aimed high in the first instance with a zero pod. I don't hate that they went down that. They made a mistake. I don't hate it. What I do hate, though, Shez, and this is a phrase that you love, what I do hate is that they failed to fail fast. In business, you got to fail fast. Establish the failures and stop doing them as quickly as possible, because that's a success in and of itself. You can't keep throwing good money after bad. And when I rocked up to Brazil at 2020 and decided that George Russell, 2022 even, and decided that George Russell victory then was reason sufficient to justify them continuing to throw good money after bad and rolling forward that zero pod concept into 2023. I think that's the cardinal sin, Shez. Being honest, bro. I just think that's... But honestly, I remember doing the car reveal when I saw that zero pod rock up. As sexy as it looks as a car, my heart just wanted to see side pods on there, because that for me would have been
in 2023. You mean?
Yeah, because that would have been an indication that they've learned, right? They've learned, and they're understanding what the meta is here as far as the design concept, and that they are converging towards that. No one said they decided to bark up this bloody very peaky performance curve and continue to throw good money after bad. Shez, for me, bruv, I'll never forgive them for that. I'll be honest with you. Never.
Can I throw something back at you though?
Of course.
Because the counter argument and the quote that has been put out, even from Helmut Marko, is people can copy us, but they're not going to get ahead of us by copying us because they don't know the extra steps that we've done. And you can argue that throughout their championship winning seasons, when everybody else was doing one thing, that high rate design, Mercedes said, nah, we're going to do something different. And it paid dividends, didn't it?
Kind of, bruv. It did. Of course it did, because they were rapid. But then you've got to understand, right, so this is... I don't want to go into this Mercedes diatribe again, Shez. Just when I thought I was out, they brought me back in. Look.
My bad.
So Mercedes' problem, if you're gonna summarize Mercedes' problems over the past few years, for me, it's been a failure to adapt, Shez. And they'd, whilst in the hybrid, so 2021 and 2020, 2019, etc., Red Bull's philosophy was like they've almost just rolled forward their philosophy very, very, very neatly and smoothly into 2022 and beyond, right? They haven't done much. Sadly for Mercedes, their tack on all the downforcey bits to the top of the car ethos doesn't suit ground force era. That's not going to work, right? So adapt then, Mercedes. And if there's a guy called Adrian Newey who's the apex predator on all things ground effect, because he did his bloody thesis in ground effect in sports cars in like 1910 or whenever, like then I mean defer to him, surely, Shez. Anyway, bro, I don't.
Can I just say, can we please call it ground force from now on? I mean, no longer is it a 90s gardening show. It's now the underlying aerodynamic philosophy of Formula One, ground force.
Did I call it ground force? Probably. Oh, mate. What chaos. All right then, bro. Give me a prediction for Brazil quickly before we round third base. Who have you got winning the race?
I think winner is probably still going to be Max. I think they'll have. I think Red Bull will probably have got on top of their tyre problems from last season, and I think on current form and the way that they've been progressing, I think one of the Mercedes will be second. And if I had to put money on it today, I'd say it's probably going to be Lewis. He's just on another level at the moment versus his teammate. As long as he doesn't.
The disrespect to Checo Perez, bro. How sad is that? We'll get on to him finally. You just dismissed him out of that. Well, you said most likely Lewis is going to be in second, right? I don't disagree with you, Shez, but that's the assertion is chaos, bro.
But it's because it feels like Checo's driving a midfield car right now.
Oh my god!
It's like he's not driving. Look, this is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying he's driving a different car to Max, but the way he is performing, it's like he's in a midfield car, and he's at the whims of the same competitions as everybody else that's in that tight pack. He's not, he's not on another level, which is where he should be.
And how sad is that, bro?
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad.
How sad is that? Go on then, let me give you my predictions. Max Verstappen, I've just checked the odds. The odds makers give Max Verstappen a 75% chance of winning this race, which is ridiculous, insane odds. Ouch. Meaning, ouch. If you want to get a quid back from your as a return, then you need to put down £3. I think with those odds, it's really, really hard to bet against Max Verstappen. I would have loved to call out, give some props to McLaren, but this type of track, they've already said at this altitude might not. Lando's already said that he doesn't expect. He thinks his best opportunity of winning a race has come and gone. That the rest don't really suit McLaren that way.
Do we really think that though? Because okay, Lando qualified really, but he qualified badly in Mexico and came back through to 5th.
Yeah, so race pace. It's interesting. Maybe Lando. Okay, all right then. So you've convinced me. Maybe I'll go Max, Lewis, Lando. I think that'll probably be the.
I think I'd agree with that.
The finishing order. Max will put it on pole, no doubt. Be another Max class from Mr. Verstappen. Although I would love to see Checo go well, bro. This is like DEFCON 5 for him. He needs this more than most, doesn't he? It's chaos, because Danny Rick as well, in doing what he did last race weekend, is like, mate. And you can even see a press conference, but have you seen them? Danny Rick and Max Verstappen keying, like it looks like Friends Reunited.
2018, mate.
Oh my God, like Friends Reunited properly. I think that's in the offing. I think that might be. I'm not going to break any news here, but I think that might be a deal already done. Shez, if I'm honest. Might well be.
But again, I still think that seat is a poisoned chalice, and as good as Daniel's doing at the AlphaTauri, it's because he's made that team build a car that suits his driving style. He's exerting his philosophy on that team. He cannot do that at Red Bull. That's not going to happen.
He's got no chance.
We'll see.
Yeah, fair play to him. It'll be interesting for next year. Finally on this, bruv. Albert Fabregas dropped a tweet earlier on in the week. The journalist / broadcaster extraordinaire. It's techie, this one, isn't it? So here's what he said in the tweet. Something to the effect of, I've just heard something. I've heard a rumour from someone in the paddock. It's very sad, and I hope it's not true. The response from F1 Twitter was like, what are you talking about? Is Alonso going to Red Bull? Is Checo Perez leaving? Are they going to put Checo Perez in Audi? Is Audi not coming into F1 anymore? What is going on? And again, journalists around the world, F1 or otherwise, looked at it and I was like, does that not fly in the face of journalistic integrity? I don't know. Is Albert even a journalist? There are so many different ways. What did you think to the tweet and the ensuing chaos, Shez? What did you think the rumour was?
What did I think the rumour was? I have to say there were a bunch of, because the theories came out. The one I was most worried about was that Liberty was selling up, which I thought was the absolute nuclear option. I think that would be the worst thing that can happen to Formula One right now. I thought the Fernando to Red Bull one was a super interesting one. I'd love to see that. Like as combustible and nonsense as that rumor is, wouldn't you love it?
Of course I would. Shout out to Baxty though. It's like, that's never going to happen, mate.
No, of course it's. I mean, yeah, he's right. It's never going to happen. But we can dream, right? And the other one that I was more sort of worried about was Lawrence Stroll potentially pulling the plug on his F1 program, or Audi deciding not to come in. I think the Audi one, the race has done a couple of videos and a couple of podcasts on this where they it's with the change at the board, that's a potential, but it would be stupid, really dumb for them to do it when they've ploughed this much cash in. And when you can see what a team like Mercedes are doing, but they're not pumping any cash into it at all, they're just raking it all in now. Don't spend all this money and not be around when the cows come home. That's silly. So I'm hoping and expecting that that's nonsense. But the Lawrence Stroll one, I don't know. Aston Martin are worth a shed load of money right now, and they are, the big investment that they've made. The wind tunnel isn't quite on tap just yet, so they still haven't really seen the potential of that. But the fact that they've spent on Fernando, on Dan Fallows, on the infrastructure, and this season started so well, and they've come back so badly. That's something where, when you talk about failing fast, I'm sure that is something that Lawrence Stroll is not particularly happy with. That was the thing that worried me the most. That was the potential rumor that I was most worried about.
That wouldn't be awful. Would it?
But can I just say, just in terms of like the whole idea of the tweet, we're always talking about like engagement and what F1 could do.
The system.
Brilliant, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. It's had us on tenterhooks. It's like the Who Killed JR. Does anyone even know what that means?
Yeah, I do. Great F1 grey beards over here. Absolutely, bro. You've nailed it. It's exactly like that.
Right? I love it. Absolutely love it. I mean, but now it creates a little bit too much pressure for this rumor to live up to whatever Alpha's actually.
Well, he was just on about Audi, wasn't he? Bro, I look at that and I'm just like, I don't know, mate. I don't know. Journalistic integrity. I think without that, it all goes to pot, man. It all goes to pot, and people.
Integrity be damned.
Well, yeah. What do we have left but for our integrity? But fair play to Albert. Maybe I'm hating Shez. Maybe I'd like to put a nothing tweet out like that and gain such engagement on Twitter. Maybe that's the goal. Maybe that's where we are in November of 2023, and that, I don't know. Work smarter and not harder.
This is less about Albert and more about the interest that there is around F1. The fact that tweet was viewed 7 million times. Brilliant. That's what we want, isn't it? We want to have a bit of discussion, and you could say this is only happening because we're having a bit of a dull season. Fine, whatever. I don't care. This is the off-track stuff is just as fun as the on-track stuff often in Formula One, and to have something like this to speculate about, I love it.
You know what the issue is though, bruv? Like for the longest time now, I've kind of placed stock in Albert Fabregas and the things that he talk. Like if you have him on F1 TV and you're going to talk about like Flovis and he's like ground effect and like the underfloor, and like you're going to talk about these serious things, and you're going to have Albert Fabregas as a source, as a fountain of knowledge and a source of all things around F1 to be true. I'm like, well, hold on now. If you go and tweet that, then I'm like, surely this is like, I can't trust that fella as much as I did before the tweet, because do you know what I mean? You've kind of like, your role has become a little bit like, what do you mean there's a rumor that you've just heard but you can't talk about? Are you a journo or are you not? Are you a journo or is this TMZ, Shez? Like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't know, genuinely, bruv. I need to know. Like, I can't. I have like very clear lines, very clear Chinese walls between my streams of content, right? Like, if I want to have fun and have a laugh, I will jump onto Netflix and watch some Dave Chappelle. If I want to like watch or listen to, if I want to find out about F1 news, I'll go to the race, or I'll go to Peter Windsor, or I'll go to Fabregas for some like technical stuff, or Doctor, you know what I mean, or Bryce. Like, I've got and because life is so hectic, Shez, I don't have time for these lines to become blood. Albert Fabregas can't become TMZ, bruv, because it's the Matrix then, and I don't know what to trust, what's real from what's fake. It's too much.
But Cam, that's what makes this rumor so compelling, is that it's coming from somebody that doesn't normally make rumors like this, right? That's why this is it's so interesting. I don't think it takes away from what he does on a day-to-day. Like, I'm not going to distrust his technical knowledge because he put this tweet out. Like, if he talks about an MGUH and says this is what an MGUH does and this is what it looks like in the car and this is how much weight it is, I'm not going to stop believing him because he put that tweet out. I'm also not going to, if he takes a photo of a car in the pit lane and explains what it's all doing, I'm not going to stop believing what he's saying. the fact that he's put this tweet out is out of character for him, but that's what makes it compelling, right? That's what's interesting about it. If Eddie Jordan had put this tweet out, we'd just be like, okay, it might be true, but it's just, this is Eddie doing Eddie. But when Albert Fabregas does it, it's a why did he do that?
Departure.
Why has he said that?
Yeah, I don't like to mix my meats, Shez. Genuinely, bro. I'm not that guy. I agree with you. That is exactly what makes it compelling, because it's a departure from precedent, right? But life is far too complicated to be mixing our content meats. I'm not a big fan of that, man. I'd rather that you did it. Fair play to the chap. That will have paid some bills, the engagement on the back of that tweet. Fair play to him. I'm
sure he doesn't need it.
I'm sure he doesn't need it. There are downsides to that sort of stuff, though, man. I like to keep my journos as journos, just be able to trust them for what they are. But I digress, Shez. I digress, bruv. I'll call it, man. That has been another episode of the Shakedown. He has been my co-host, Shez, at ShezMed on Twitter. I have been Cameron F1. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, please. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. It all helps. Between now and next time, as always, enjoy the racing, and remember to look but never stare.